is a special video session. Over the last few weeks, I've had a lot of my clients and friends ask me about whether or not I think the real estate market is going to tank. The last time we had stock market go down was followed by real estate going down. And so I thought I'd address that with somebody who I think very highly of, a good friend of mine, Nicole George. Hey, Nicole.
Hi.
Nicole runs the My Premier Property group. They're a part of Keller Williams Ballantine. And if you don't know, Keller Williams Ballantine is the #1 Keller Williams office in the world within their franchise. And Nicole's team has actually won a couple of, what would you call, I don't want to call them competitions. They are, but awards for having one of the best performing teams. The amount of volume that they do is unbelievable. They have a closing about one closing every 2.5 to 3 days. She knows what's going on, who's moving, who's not, which parts of town are great. And you're licensed in both North and South Carolina, which is also phenomenal because I know a lot of people move across the border for various reasons. And I think the demographics and also the market dynamics are a little different between down in Fort Mill, Rock Hill, as well as when you come up here into Ballantine, Charlotte, and so forth. So for today, what I'd love to do is just get some feedback from you in terms of what's going on in the markets. Again, with the stock market being down, has that translated into the housing market being down? Should people who were on the fence of buying or selling, should they wait for this to play out? Or is now still a great time? And then obviously with everybody being at home, how does that play into buying or selling a house, and any other special considerations as you're thinking about that? And of course, it is springtime, which is traditionally the hottest time for real estate. And we'd just love to hear from you about any changes that have been happening. Also would love to, I know I'm throwing a lot at you all at once.
I'm ready.
But also financing is important. Usually financing changes whenever the economy changes. And then also in terms of just timeline, I know in the past probably 2 years, being able to close has been anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And that's been kind of the norm. Where I remember I bought my first house 5 years ago, and they told me best case scenario was 4 weeks, and I should expect 8 weeks. And so I would just love to hear how that's changed here in the last 2 weeks. I've heard a lot of things about the courts being closed or being difficult to deal with. So just tell us what's been going on and what we should do.
So many things. I love it. Thank you for having me on. Think the world of you and your business. So I appreciate this. My grandmother, both my grandmothers lived through the Great Depression. And so they have lived their whole rest of their life recouping from the Great Depression. Even when they've been recouped, they've mentally been there waiting for the next Great Depression to happen. And you fast forward to 2007, and anyone who lived through the market crash of 2007 is like waiting for the next market crash to happen. And whether it ever comes or not, like the Great Depression has not been back, people are like on their toes waiting for it. And I have no data indicating that the market's going to crash. The stock market, the Federal Reserve market, and primary/commercial lending markets and the housing market are all very different things. And right. So while they're tied to some extent in terms of people's financial flexibility and what they have to offer, they're not a direct correlation to stocks going down, houses going down.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think so many people are so consumed by what happened in 07, 08 that thought is still there of, okay, anytime the stock market goes down, housing prices have to go down. And I think what a lot of people miss is that that 07, 08 recession was driven by different factors compared to
Mm-hmm.
what we have now. Now, that doesn't mean that, we're not going to see an adjustment, but I think that the dynamics are just so different where uh, the lending market, I think, is still there right now. And like you mentioned, the Federal Reserve supporting the economy as a whole and lowering interest rates, flooding the market with money, and
Yep.
buying more mortgage debt, buying also corporate debt. So I guess the big question then becomes, are interest rates lower? What does that mean for if we're I guess what we're saying, or what you're saying, is prices are still stable. We're not seeing those go down. Do you expect them to go up like they've been going up the last 3 to 5 years?
If I had a crystal ball, I'd be so pumped. But I can focus on the data that leads me to believe that they will continue to go up. And the reason for that is in the crash, 2007, 2008, 2009, there was a lot of inventory, 8+ months. When it's 8+ months of inventory, you're really working in a buyer's market. When it's 5 to 7 months of inventory, you're working in a balanced market. And when it's less than 5 months of inventory, you're working in a seller's market. We have 1.7 months of inventory in Charlotte Metro. 1.7 months. So there's no data to show that. Why would sellers lower their price when it is very clearly still a seller's market? And it's not that buyers aren't buying. Charlotte is not an inflated market compared to a lot of cities in the country. Again, people in Charlotte feel like it's more expensive than it used to be, and that's a fact. But it is not unaffordable to live here. In fact, we're ranked top 10 after top 10 after top 10 in one of the most affordable cities to live, and the most value for your money in terms of lifestyle and housing. And so there's no indication of prices going down because people are moving here every day, and homes are not going live during this COVID-19, which means there's going to be a delayed spring season. Spring weather may be here. Spring buying season is not here because our showings are restricted. So while they're happening, it's really the people who have to be buying. It's the people who are divorcing, the people who are expecting baby, the people who are already under a contract, the people who are relocating from out of town. It's the people who are the highest motivated buyers out there. The buyers who've had luxury to wait a little bit, they're waiting this out. Good, bad, or indifferent, right? Because there's less buyers to compete with, so they may actually end up spending less on a property than they would 4 months from now. And when all the other buyers decide they're ready to reassess their purchase.
Sure.
And everyone's risk averse at different levels. That's both buyers and sellers. Sellers are nervous in the areas that showings aren't allowed unless the property is vacant, which is primarily Mecklenburg right now. And the reality is their house will sell, and still for top dollar, because the second this is lifted, everyone who needed to buy or wants to buy this year is going to come back at it if they still have a job.
Okay, so that's very helpful. And you brought up showing situation, and especially Mecklenburg County, how unique it is. So talk a little bit more about that. Really, what are the constraints? What's allowed? What should people be aware of if they're looking to buy? What does the process look like? I know it's usually you narrow down whatever 3 to 8 houses that you might like based on pictures and price. Now translate that into this whole virtual showing situation. Like, who does the recording? How good or bad is it? Both from a buyer and a seller perspective, what should we be thinking about if we don't want to wait 6 months for this to be over. If we're looking to buy in the next 4 to 12 weeks, the next month to 3 months, how do we play this given the constraints for Mecklenburg, but two, also this virtual showing scenario and how to
Sure.
make good informed decisions?
That's a really great question. Every agent in the area is working differently, just like we always do. Not every accountant or CPA is created equal, and neither are all agents. So,
Very
what we're
true.
specific, very, very true. There's 18,000 of us. What we're specifically doing is a couple things. Number one is we have an attorney drafted addendum to the contract that allows, let me back up. Realtors are considered essential, but real estate has a lot of moving job pieces to it. So, for example, showing is not considered an essential part of the job at the moment. So that's where showing and virtual tours are coming in handy. Once a buyer has money invested and something to lose, skin in the game, then business as usual with 17 safety precautions, 6 feet apart, no one in the house, those kind of things. So what we're doing is we have an attorney drafted addenda. So if a buyer cannot get into a house, they can actually put a sight unseen offer in working like this. And instead of risking a lot of money, they're going to risk a teeny tiny bit of money in comparison to what they normally would. Then once money is on the line, money meaning greater than $1 on the line, then there is a 72-hour break period where we can get to the house and then put more money on the line if they want to move forward, like a standard contract would be. Alternatively, if they didn't want to move forward at that point after seeing it in person, then of course you can terminate for very, very, very little to risk. And you're still following within the safety and order compliance regulations. The other thing to that is, I think this is kind of opening up a door that people weren't anticipating, but some sellers are doing FaceTime tours with buyers. Just like why you have an attorney at court, this can go wrong in many ways. It's an amazing way to see the property and ask questions. There's also a way for emotions, for some unnecessary drama in a transaction to exist where it hasn't previously. And so typically the buyer and seller stay separate, whereas when you're FaceTiming with the seller, you're going to get a little more interaction. In a multiple offer situation, I could see some red flag opportunities for people to raise their hand and say they were misjudged, whatever. With that said, any way we can get information on the property, we are doing. On our listing side of things, outside of Mecklenburg County, we're still doing Matterport, so that's 3D walkthrough tours. You literally can click on a button and drag your screen around to see every angle of that side of the property. It's almost better than being there in person because you can be a little more objective, whereas in person, you're like, oh my gosh, it feels like home. And again, the feelings flood in, which is great. You want someone to feel that way. But when you are looking at a computer, you are being a little more objective. And when you're looking virtually, you can remove some of the emotion, allowing you to make a really good decision, really look at the location, really look at the neighborhood, really do a drive-through. And so all that to say, lots of virtual tours, lots of online research, and really just getting creative with how we can set the contracts up to best protect our buyers and sellers and let their business of real estate continue.
So what I'm hearing you say is, I think what you mentioned with that dollar amount that you have to lose, is that the due diligence fee that you traditionally have to put up to go do due diligence and do the inspection?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
basically been adjusted.
Yep. So in the state of North Carolina, this is different for South Carolina. So this is very specific to North Carolina. We do have to be cognizant because we work on the border of both. We work anywhere within 50 miles of Center City. So someone could be looking in Pineville and then Indian in the same day, and we have to prepare them for both contracts. So in the state of North Carolina, there is a 100% non-refundable fee anytime you take a house off the market that is not new construction. That fee is called due diligence, and it's your purchase power to take the house off and to perform your inspections, appraisal, etc. In this case, we're recommending a very, very low amount, anything greater than $1 to access the house then. Then we, within 72 hours, would be technically under contract and can go see it in person and make a decision before more money's on the line.
Okay, very interesting. And then the second thing I heard you say is the 3D virtual tours. That those have been around, but now it sounds like they're getting more prominence as a first step of the research phase as a buyer, where you're saying, okay, well, instead of us driving around all day, we'll do these 3D tours, kind of have a better idea of what we really like, don't like, and based off of that, we can then do this low due diligence fee, due diligence deposit, and then go actually see it once we're under contract.
That's correct. And just to clarify, it's not, you'll go on Zillow, you'll go on Realtor, you'll go on Redfin, all the websites, and you'll notice that not every agent even uses professional pictures in their listings. So if someone's not willing to use professional pictures, they're definitely not going to be investing in this very expensive 3D tour. And so that's something too, just in our standard value proposition, when you list with us, you get professional pictures, professional measurements. Now you're getting the 3D walkthrough tour. And so that's the importance of picking out a good buyer's agent and B, a good listing agent, because if you pick an agent that's taking pictures with their phone, not only will you not sell in this market, you're lucky to get by in a good thriving market. And so that, yeah, people are doing 3D tours. It's the people who are choosing to spend the investment on them because they are not cheap. So when you're seeing this online, you know, the agents are really advocating for their sellers in this time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, Warren Buffett always said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. So it kind of depends on the, I guess, on the listing side, if you're really motivated to sell, and motivated doesn't mean necessarily price, but if you're looking to sell your house so you can move to the next one, or if you're moving cities altogether, you better be working with somebody who has everything already set up, has the technology, the resources to make sure that your house shows as best as it can so that you can get top dollar and close quickly. So that's very insightful. All right, talk to me about mortgages. How are we I don't care about interest rates; those change every day. But the whole process in terms of going from this whole virtual tour, due diligence, it sounds like everything's being slightly delayed. On the mortgage side, how's it looking in terms of submitting documents? Are lenders doing additional verifications? Are they looking for more down payments? How's all of that shaking out right now?
That is a really good question because people should be informed on this. So lending guidelines are tightening up. So again, back to the 2007, 2008 crash, very loose guidelines in the first place, guidelines that we no longer operate under in the first place. Fast forward to COVID-19, they are tightening up lending guidelines tighter than they have been in a hot, skinny minute. Someone who may have been pre-qualified for up to 300 before COVID, they're now tightening that margin maybe to 275, maybe to 250, depends on how tight it was in the first place. Down payment assistance programs, really bad time to be utilizing those because you're not guaranteed to close. That's going to be a fund that gets pulled to some extent because it's a high risk loan. Jumbo loans, the product, the interest rates are sky high because it's a higher risk loan for the lender to give. And so only certain lenders right now have good jumbo products. And so things are definitely tightening up. Keep in mind what I said about inventory though, right? Inventory is at 1.7 months, which means prices are going to stabilize or go higher because the demand is there. And lending regulations are getting tighter, bringing qualifications down. And so a buyer is going to be able to afford less house the longer they wait, the tighter the restrictions get and the higher the prices go, which is why if you need to buy, I'm not trying to convince you to buy if you don't want to, but if you're thinking about buying, it's still a legitimate time to buy. And as those guidelines get tighter, it's going to be harder because inventory is low and prices are going to keep going up. That's assuming everything stays the same as it is today. It's assuming inventory stays low, people keep moving here, et cetera. The other piece about lending that people should know is because of all the furloughs, because of all the layoffs, because of all the adjustments in employment right now, the standard process 3 months ago was the lender would run an employment verification at pre-qualification and once you're under contract during underwriting. Now lenders are adding an additional practice where they're verifying employment and the fact that they will be employed anywhere between 60 and 90 days, depending on the lender, after closing, 48 hours before closing. So if you ever notice that you're getting laid off, and when they do that employment verification, that last minute employment verification, you could lose all that you have invested in the transaction a day before closing.
Could do to kind of mitigate that? I mean, nobody knows if and when they're going to get laid off. How do you guide your clients in terms of being aware of that, protecting themselves, and making sure that they're not out several $1,000s on the front end over something that could be temporarily? You could lose your job temporarily and then in 4 weeks be back at the same job with the same pay.
Yeah.
Is there anything there in the contracts that you can do or minimize the amount of out-of-pocket expense you have on the front end?
Absolutely.
Before you close. All right, tell us.
So we have the COVID due diligence addendum that I mentioned. So that's one way of minimizing risk on the front end. So let's fast forward. You use that addendum, you move forward with the contract, whether you're on the buy or sell side. There is a COVID-19 addendum in general now that the Real Estate Commission, and this is specific to North Carolina. Again, every state has its own contractual obligations and the way the contracts work. And North and South Carolina are very different. So they have two different entities for this. But South Carolina is almost always protected against this because there's a financing contingency. And in North Carolina, there's not a financing contingency. So there is now a COVID-19 addendum that basically states that if the buyer has been negatively affected and no longer qualifies for the loan, or the attorney's office closes due to this, or if the Register of Deeds can't record closings, any number of things in that regard, that's where the COVID-19 addendum can kick in and protect that earnest money and either delay closing until you have things under control or get your earnest money back so you're not completely, with your hands tied, eliminating and terminating the transaction.
Okay. I mean, thinking about that sounds all very complicated and like a lot going on. And I would think, again, another reason why somebody would want to work with a pro that understands, one, what's going on, but two, also the differences between North and South Carolina and being able to move between the two and guide clients on making the decisions. So
I'd say too, there is a lot going on. I mean, every day in almost everyone's world, let's call it every third day to be conservative, there's like a whole change of orders from county to county, locally, from state to state, being on the border, from the regulatory boards of real estate, the regulatory boards of the Realtor Association, the commission. I mean, there's so many boards in everyone's industry that then comes down with new requirements. And so what our team does to stay on top of that is we've been functioning as much normal, so to speak, as possible by utilizing Zoom technology every week to make sure what are we doing to make sure we're doing the best representation for our clients? Like what's come out that we can be utilizing? What are other agents using? What attorney is ahead of this? And so we really try to stay on top of that for both states. And also that's a regular practice for us, but it is especially important in a time like this.
All makes perfect sense. And then talk a little bit about current houses on the market versus new construction. Has new construction continued to grow at the best pace it can? I know that's been a topic over the last couple of years that builders can't keep up with demand. Has this done anything to that equation? What are your thoughts on, even looking at a new build, given that there's more uncertainty? And I know you mentioned everybody's got different risk appetite and willingness to put some money on the line. But what are you seeing in terms of new construction and how that's going to shake out?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought new construction up because people don't realize, people feel like they've been put in a box with this virtual tour situation. They're like, I've had clients buy without seeing their property over and over again in my career. But now that it is a requirement, people do not want to do it because they don't want to be told how to conduct their search. In new construction, people buy virtually all the time. You see a floor plan and that's it online. You may get to walk through one, but it's still not your specific plan that you're buying that day with your finishes. And then you furthermore need to go to the design center in most cases. And so people have been buying virtually for years. Now that it's just slapping us on the wrist, everyone's like, whoa, don't tell me what to do. That's an interesting concept with new construction altogether in terms of the virtual buying in the first place. But to address your actual question, new construction and builder services are essential businesses as well. So properties that have been under contract are continuing construction as normal. They're taking proper safety precautions. What has slowed down is walk-in traffic into the model homes, as you can imagine. They're doing appointment-only business. So again, back to that super hyper-motivated buyer that has to buy or is really strongly looking to buy immediately and doesn't have as much of a flexible timeline. What will slow down is real estate works in 60 to 90-day cycles. So if walk-ins are slow today, if design centers are closed and or only taking virtual appointments and get backed up, what we will start to see is a drag in inventory home. A builder is not going to start a new project today that a buyer doesn't have money on the line, most likely, because even though there's a demand, there's a high risk for them with no buyer. And so we will see in, I think, 3 to 6 months, a little bit of a delay in new construction. And new constructions are only way out of a seller's market in any capacity.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like that industry is going to continue to me, that's not surprising that they're kind of slowing and adjusting based on demand. I think home builders have always been that way, even if they're building spec homes. They're, the development's there, they're ready to build, but they need to have some sort of money coming in or commitments vis-a-vis deposits and stuff like that for them to actually get going on the physical construction.
Well, and we have a buyer under contract. They went under probably the first week or two of this. So very scary time. The super nervous about their stocks for obvious reasons. And at the end of the day, they decided to move forward because any financial advisor will tell you that if you're planning to live in the house for 3 to 6 years plus, what is happening today is not going to affect you in the housing market because what goes down must come up and what goes up must come down. And it's a cyclical business. And so they're going to move in their house in the fall and they're going to live in it. And when they go to sell, it's not today's climate that they're affected by in any way. And then the other piece to that is the building process for them while they're pulling permits with the county and moving forward on that front. The design center is doing virtual only. And not everyone's willing to pick their selections virtually. So that's where some of the delay will come in. The lack of inventory home from scratch in the next few months. And then also the delay in getting progress made on properties that are under contract. But the builders themselves are building anything that was pending construction.
Good. And what additional advice would you have for somebody who, let's break it down, the buyer side versus the listing side. On the listing side, let's say I want to sell and now I'm nervous. I mean, you just said it, 1.7 months, that blows my mind. So I shouldn't have any hesitation listing. It seems like there's plenty of demand, but what else should people who are looking to sell do? What are some thoughts or programs they should be aware of? Anything that you and your team are noticing that is helping sellers do a better job in terms of presenting their house, in terms of, I know you do all the research in terms of what it should be listing for, kind of how to set it up and whatnot, but is there anything that they can do to kind of be ahead of all of this and make sure that they're getting through the process without having a whole lot of headaches and without a whole lot of, hesitation, really?
Sure. Yeah, if you're planning to list in the next 30 to 45 days and or sooner, it is definitely the time to start prepping the house. We're doing virtual staging consultations. So people are sending us pictures of each room as is. They're not cleaning. They're not staging. They're just sending us the picture as is, just like if we came over for a listing appointment, and we're providing a room by room breakdown of what we recommend to prep the house. So you can actually take advantage of the time you're working from home, and or less chaos with social events, and to be prepping that house. And obviously, I say obviously, it is obvious to me, homes sell for more money and faster when they're staged and prepped and show ready. And so when you're able to take this time to get ahead of that, that's something sellers could definitely be working on.
Okay.
The other thing they could be working, go ahead, sorry.
No, keep going.
The other thing they could be working on effectively is not in Mecklenburg, in Mecklenburg, if the house is vacant. Outside of Mecklenburg, there are times where we can get professional pictures made. And for the vacant homes, since staging is not an essential business at this time, we've been digitally staging pictures. So we've been putting up pictures where it looks like it's staged, and we've had some success with that. And so it's just really, there's not one shoe that fits all sellers. There's not one shoe that fits all buyers. But what we do is sit down and go over the timeline and make sure, and sit down virtually now, and just make sure that their needs would be met based off their ideal timeline, and make sure we maximize the market that they are in, the price point that they are in, the neighborhood they're in, because it's going to be so unique right now. Just really being able to digest that, set a plan, and being able to execute it for them.
Fantastic. I've learned a lot today here. To kind of wrap it up, anything you want to add to this conversation in terms of either just general thoughts, a little bit more about you and your team, and of course, contact information, people who are interested in learning more about the process, or if people are ready to look at buying and selling, how can they get in touch with you, your team, and then kind of what else do you want them to do to be ready to maximize, obviously, the use of time and make sure that the whole process is as smooth as possible for everybody involved?
Sure. I would just end on saying, this virus is not the only thing that's contagious. Fear is, chaos is, negative energy and mindset is. And so we really focus on controlling what we can and working in the environment that we can work in. The virus is here, the pandemic is here. We're working in it, and everyone's having to make adaptive measures in each of their businesses, I'm sure. And so we're doing the same thing. So everyone on my team is licensed in North and South Carolina, including the administrative and support. I call them the success team because we can't do what we do without them. But including the success team, we're all licensed. We're all full time. You don't have anyone hopping over to the bar or driving an Uber in between your showings. And it's really just what we love and care about doing. So we serve at a high level, or try to. I can be reached by cell at 704-964-8718. Or, of course, you can go to our website, mypremierproperty.com. Again, that's mypremierproperty.com, and then we can help you guys out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've, again, really enjoyed this. I hope everything keeps going the way it should, and that we're all going to be back to actually doing more in-person stuff. I've gone a little crazy here. I'm used to working from home. I've always been more virtual than a lot of my counterparts, or a lot of my other accountants out there who are so used to brick and mortar. But I'm starting to get a little stir crazy. So I can't wait to be through all of this and go out a little bit and see all of us continue to succeed.
I know. I'm ready to. I met a new client relocating from Tennessee yesterday, and we were looking at vacant homes we were showing, and it's just weird not to shake their hand. Like, almost, I felt unprofessional. I was like, "Hey, nice to meet you." You get a smile.
The good old elbow bump. Well, cool. Thanks again, Nicole. And I'll put all your contact info as part of the email and below the video. So, folks, if you're looking to buy, looking to sell, I know Nicole also deals with investment properties. We didn't talk about that on this call because of time. But she and her team are phenomenal and have been doing this full time for so many years. And they're local here to Charlotte, so they know the market in and out, and will obviously take great care of you. So call them.
Thank you.